Are anatomy wizards really the chosen ones, delivered to us by mystical storks wielding scalpels? If that's true, then someone owes me a snazzy hat and an owl, because my Hogwarts letter for identifying bones never showed up. Not in my mailbox, not in my birth canal, nowhere. Let's bust this myth wide open. Many think anatomy expertise is some magical, innate talent, like tongue-rolling or reciting Shakespeare backward for talent show bragging rights. Pop culture doesn't help. Painting anatomical geniuses as pint-sized prodigies, sketching femurs into their PB&Js before they can even spell their own names. If that were true, my DNA would read 20% coffee, 80% desperate student, not potential latent anatomy wizard. Here's the kicker. Neuroscience shatters that fantasy faster than a cold cadaver in February. Research shows anatomical mastery isn't hardwired at birth. It's painstakingly earned through practice and exposure. You might have called the cortex the cotex just last week, yet with enough grind, you can know more muscles than you have problems. Those neural pathways? Not gifts. They're highways paved by repetition, not prophecy. So no, sorry. There's no med school waiting by the fireplace to hand out Hogwarts letters to newborns with a penchant for the occipital bone. Anatomical fluency comes from flashcards, not fate. When it comes to mastering every twist of the brachial plexus, it's less nature versus nurture, and more flashcards versus full-blown panic. The good news? Every aspiring anatomy ace has the spellbook they need, deliberate study and grit. Anatomical excellence doesn't come from clairvoyance, but from commitment. The only real magic here is your willingness to keep at it. Now back to those nerves. No wand required. While some believe talent is inherent, others think the key lies in sheer memorization. If anatomy were a spelling bee, cramming endless Latin tongue twisters would guarantee gold medals. Or would it? Picture a med student proudly proclaiming sternocleidomastoid, only to freeze when quizzed on where to actually find it. Spoiler, not on the menu at your favorite Italian joint. The myth is tempting. Stockpile enough vocab, and you'll breeze through anatomy powered by nothing but flashcards and Red Bull. But hold your horses. Here's the real muscle behind the magic. Anatomy isn't about marathon memorization contests. It's about understanding how body parts connect, function, and occasionally throw a tantrum, especially when your patient's pain is as mysterious as your Wi-Fi outage. Sure, dropping sphygmomanometer makes you sound like the life of any party, but it won't help when you need to locate one in a pinch, let alone actually use it. Let's be honest, rote memorization is the junk food of anatomy study. Like potato chips, you can't stop at one flashcard, but you're not getting any stronger. Even parrots can squawk anatomy terms. If they tried surgery, we'd all be lining up at the lawyer's office instead of the clinic. Savvy students know success means picturing organs in 3D, sketching nerve pathways, and linking all that textbook stuff to the real person sitting across from you. Mnemonics and memory tricks? Perfect brain snacks. But to ace real-life anatomy, you need more than witty acronyms. You need those aha moments. So blend your textbook trivia with sharp critical thinking. Because when it comes to anatomy, dynamic engagement beats deadpan memorization every time, in class, at the clinic, and beyond. But is memorizing facts enough? Or do textbooks tell the whole story? Hook. Imagine becoming a world-class chef by reading recipe books, never peeling a single onion. Voila! You're ready to run a Michelin star kitchen, right? Just don't be surprised if nobody wants to eat your soup. Me either. Similarly, there's a tasty myth bubbling up in med school lore: master anatomy by devouring textbooks alone. Just bury yourself in Grey's Anatomy and abracadabra. You'll magically know where every nerve and vessel hides. Fact. If only it were that simple. Textbooks make a fine intellectual appetizer. Neat diagrams, clear labels, bite-sized explanations. But they're just the amuse-bouche, not the full meal. Real anatomical wisdom sticks when you're elbow-deep in cadaver labs or wrestling plastic models. Unless you're planning to diagnose by shoving Grey's Anatomy at patients' foreheads, you'd better get your hands dirty. Punch. Let's face it, if textbooks did all the work, medical schools would hand out library cards and scrubs at the door. But no matter how brilliant the illustrator, no real artery politely lights up in neon for your convenience. Bodies aren't by the book. They're more like a choose-your-own-adventure, with surprise plot twists. Braybridge. So yeah, anatomy texts are crucial. Think of them as maps. But you don't truly know the terrain until you've wandered it in 3D. Clinical confidence comes from poking, prodding, and occasionally spectacularly flubbing it, preferably on plastic or cadavers, not live patients. Active recall and hands-on practice. That's the secret sauce. And yes, still no onions required. Even with books, some imagine that true mastery requires solitary study. Ever imagine history's geniuses holed up in dimly lit rooms, fueled by endless coffee and existential dread? The classic myth. The lone genius, main wild, muttering formulas to the walls, dodging sunlight like a vampire with a research grant. Newton supposedly got bonked by apples in some solitary garden. Tesla chose pigeons over people as his sole companions. The message? To be brilliant, you must become the world's most caffeinated hermit. But science begs to differ. Sure, history adores a good recluse story, but many breakthroughs sprang from lively social lives and spirited chit-chat. Newton, for all his brooding, volleyed letters with fellow scientists, sparking debates and sharpening ideas. Einstein? The guy turned coffeehouse banter into theories that bent space and time. And Marie Curie, she didn't just collaborate, she basically led a science tag team, including her husband. The punchline? Locking yourself away chasing a Nobel Prize will likely just earn you bad posture, epic dust bunnies, and a chronic case of cabin fever. Real discoveries often bubbled up from heated networks, exchanged letters, and the occasional pastry-fueled argument. Modern research confirms it. Collaboration turbocharges innovation, while solo brooding mostly yields questionable hairstyles and achievements invisible to everyone but yourself. So next time you hear about the solitary genius, ask yourself, if they were truly alone, who chronicled their terrible hair days and eureka moments? Turns out genius is less about torment and more about coffee breaks and compelling company. Oh, and maybe some decent lighting wouldn't hurt either. This image often includes the idea that fun has no place in the process. Picture the wildest party you've ever crashed. Now swap the thumping bass for the cheerful buzz of a bone saw and a hint of formaldehyde cologne. Welcome to the golden age of early anatomy, where textbooks were optional and breaking a few laws was practically part of the syllabus. Forget the stereotype of dour, tea-sipping bookworms. These pioneers were more like thrill-seeking nocturnal scavengers with scalpels. Scratch beneath the surface, and you'll uncover stories juicier than a daytime soap. Take Andreas Vesalius, caught tiptoeing through cemeteries under moonlight, not for a midnight stroll, but to borrow some research materials. A classic case of research before permission. Then there's Dr. John Hunter, who wasn't content with dissecting humans. He collected exotic animals, and in a legendary heist, allegedly swiped the bones of an Irish giant. Nothing says party animal like hauling home a 7-foot skeleton for show and tell. Anatomy labs back then weren't dim libraries, but mad scientist socials, where rivalries flared and the occasional flying organ sparked full-on soap opera drama. These figures were hailed as heroes by day and branded grave-robbing villains by night. Sometimes both in the same breath. Today's med students sweat over exams, but at least they don't dodge pitchfork-wielding mobs. So yes, early anatomists didn't just hit the books, they hit the graveyards as well. Strictly for science, naturally. Yet, despite the hardships, these masters are thought to have flawless recall from the start. Think anatomy masters are born with photographic memories? More like Polaroids taken in bad lighting. If these folks really popped out of the womb reciting muscle insertions, toddlers everywhere would be naming their metatarsals before mama. But legends love a good shortcut. So the myth persists. Anatomy wizards ace every bone and muscle on sight, probably while solving a Rubik's Cube with one hand. Here's the inconvenient truth. Even the greats fumble the femur. And don't get us started on those sneaky hand muscles. If they were any craftier, they'd need a permit. Their so-called perfect recall isn't a genetic superpower. It's the result of years playing hide-and-seek with Grey's Anatomy and unleashing a suspicious number of skeleton puns. That aura of effortless expertise? Built on a pyramid of flashcards, mistakes, and at least one existential crisis per semester. See, anatomy knowledge isn't gifted with the first stethoscope. It cements over time, brewed with repetition, caffeine, and the occasional cry singing about the difference between ulna and radius. Spoiler alert, Mixing those two up isn't failure, it's a rite of passage. Even veteran anatomy professors can misidentify a tibia without their morning coffee. So if you're fretting over your memory, and the only thing you recall perfectly on day one is panic, take heart. True anatomical mastery forms bit by bit, fueled by more mnemonics, color-coded highlighters, and regret-filled study sessions than anyone dares admit. The brain, much like connective tissue, only strengthens with regular use. Bridge the gap between "what bone is that?" and "I own this skeleton" by embracing the glorious, messy marathon of learning. Your memory will thank you, eventually. Moreover, it's assumed they bypassed historical context without consequence. They say those who forget history are doomed to repeat it, which might explain why every 90s trend is back with a vengeance. Somewhere, somebody's slapping a flannel shirt around their waist and insisting Tamagotchis were the pinnacle of high art, before we roll our eyes and mutter, "Who needs this ancient backstory?" Let's call it what it is, scholarly déjà vu, with extra platform shoes. Trying to grasp a complex topic without its history is like assembling IKEA furniture blindfolded. Technically possible, but you'll end up with leftover screws and a desk moonlighting as modern art. Historical context isn't optional. It's the GPS you desperately need before wandering into the jungle of half-truths and YouTube hot takes. Ignore it, and you'll soon be bringing a toga to a board meeting because, hey, that's what leaders wore. The myth that history is just old stuff lulls us into blissful ignorance, right until we trip over the same banana peels as our ancestors. The icons we celebrate didn't rise or fall in a vacuum. Their fates hinged on economics, cultural quirks, and, let's be honest, some truly questionable haircuts. Skip the context, and you're primed to misquote, misuse, or misunderstand pivotal ideas. Ask any grad student who excitedly pitches a groundbreaking blockchain philosophy, only to find out Plato beat them to it, minus the NFTs. So, if the road to your overnight success sounds suspiciously smooth, someone's been doing some serious historical airbrushing. The messy prequel, the knockoff Discman, the dot-com crash, the regrettable sideburns matters. Without it, we're just scanning headlines and sipping bean water, wondering why our coffee never brews. And finally, repetition is viewed by some as unnecessary for these prodigies. Imagine Michelangelo forced to redraw the human skeleton 50 times before earning his sculptor's license. You can just hear his guild complaint echoing through history. "If I see one more femur, I'm chiseling my own." Yet somehow, the myth endures that Renaissance anatomical geniuses just churned out endless carbon copies, mechanically sketching the same bones until their sketchbooks overflowed. Sure, we think, this robotic grind-forged genius. Time for a reality check. Leonardo da Vinci, the mastermind behind flying machines and mysterious smiles, wasn't stuck on repeat in the anatomy lab, nor was Vesalius, the medical pioneer. Their secret? Targeted curiosity. Leonardo might study an exposed shoulder one day, then dive into the heart's chambers the next. Vesalius? He chased rare deformities just for the thrill of the hunt, not mindlessly redrawing femurs. It wasn't about grinding out identical skeletons until their eyes glazed over. Imagine Leonardo forced to copy his own arm study 100 times. He'd have died of boredom, not plague. And honestly, tracing veins on 53 identical arms is a surefire way to hate arms, veins, or even drawing itself. The Renaissance secret sauce? Quality over quantity. Observing closely and asking, what haven't I seen yet? If these masters had relied on rote drills, the Sistine Chapel ceiling would be a wallpaper of cherubs lined up like stencils. So next time you're about to tackle Chapter 3 for the 37th time, remember, mastery thrives on intention and freshness, not the mind-numbing grind of identical repeats. Your brain and your sketchbook will thank you.